Gordon. Joyson. Here. John.
Here.
Yummy.
Here.
Brent.
Here.
Michelle.
Here.
Ron. Okay, we have, everyone's here.
And then in addition on the call, Cody, who else is on the call with us?
We have Michael Keenan, Ryan Gash, Diana Ryder, Ellie Garrison, Jennifer Ridley, Jim Staley, Richie Moman, and Susan Ray,
So Gordon,
outside of everyone else.
for your benefit, that's all my staff for the most part, with the exception of Michael Keenan, whose picture's right down there on the thumbnail, and he is with Hood, formerly Cochrane Head. Okay, so.
Steve,
right.
we can't see your video for the boardroom.
Let me fix that. Let me fix that.
Thank you. There we go. We can see you now.
Okay.
Okay, the agenda you have in front of you, you'll see that we on number 8 have closed session and number 9 is other business. I would like to move number 9 up to in between the current 7 and 8 and to leave the closed session for the end. Any objections to that?
I move approval of the amended agenda.
A second.
All in favor? Don't take a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And
Motion passes.
Mr. Grubal is always asking us to ask for abstentions, just to.
Any abstentions?
Thank you.
Okay, there being none, the agenda is approved. Okay.
Hey, this is Michelle. Can you just go a little bit slower for those of us that are on Zoom so that we can unmute when we do the vote? That would be great.
Sorry.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks.
I was just going to make a short comment. For those who don't know, everybody here knows me, but I rejoined the board about a week ago through appointment from the commission, and the appointment to the finance chair was made shortly thereafter. So look forward to working with everyone again and getting on down the road. So with that, the minutes from the prior meeting. I don't have those, and I'm going to abstain anyway.
Right.
So.
I move approval of the minutes from the prior meeting.
Second. All, any further comments? So, do we need a roll call for a vote?
Not a roll call, just a voice vote.
Okay. All in favor of the minutes being approved?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain. This is Yummy because I wasn't there.
And I will do the same because I was not here as well. Okay. Next item is the auditor update, and Michael's on it.
Michael is on.
This.
Yeah, I'd be happy to just give a 30-second introduction and then pass it over to Michael. So as we discussed, as Quan and I found out, that Cochrane Head and Vic was acquired by a company called Hood CPAs. And we do have an engagement with Cochrane Head. We'll probably have to sign a new engagement on new letterhead, would be my guess at some point. But we felt because they are engaged and we're planning on working with them through our contract, it would be beneficial to let Michael Keenan come and talk to you a little bit about the merger, for you all to ask any questions that you might have about the merger and the new arrangement, and just make sure that everybody's feeling comfortable about everything as we start. Well, we're still quite a ways from really starting our work with the auditors, but just make sure that everybody's feeling up to date and comfortable with the arrangement. So Michael, can we go ahead and pass it to you and let you say anything you would like to say and answer any questions?
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Thank you for the introduction, Steve. Again, my name is Michael Keenan. I'm now with Hood and Associates. formerly Cochran Head Vick and Company. In December 1st of 2021, Cochran Head Vick was acquired by Hood and Associates. They're primarily located out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, with also offices in Austin, Texas. Hood and Associates is owned, and the main partner is Paul Hood. As far as Cochran Head Vick and Company, they maintained all 7 offices that Cochran Head Vick had, with 4 in the metro area here in Kansas City, 1 in St. Joseph, and 3 in mid-Missouri. They maintained all of the personnel, as I said, all office locations. And I think as far as our service and auditing and tax, we expect the same level of service that you received under Cochran Head Vick. Really, the only change is the name. Again, that's what I believe. That kind of addresses the merger and the acquisition. Are there any questions that anyone might have?
Michael, this is Gordon Cook. How many, what's the head count of the 2 firms prior to the merger?
Okay, Cochran Head Vick had approximately 55 employees. Hood and Associates, I don't know the exact number. I believe they had right in the 40 range. So total, we're at the 90 to 100 range, and probably looking to expand is the goal of the owner, Paul Hood and Associates. But I will say that the personnel, again, I will still be assigned as the primary lead manager for this audit, and we expect to have the same personnel if they're available as far as the audit. So I don't see a significant change in the way that CHV operated, and will operate the same as Hood and Associates, as we need to follow our professional standards regardless of what our name is.
I think one of the things I was wanting to accomplish today is that lots of times mergers happen in a couple of different ways. Sometimes a merger is essentially the purchase of a client list. And what will happen is that somebody will just come in and merge to get the person's client list and then shut down the other location and then serve all of their clients. And then sometimes a merger is truly a merger where you combine the offices. So far, as near as we can tell, and everything Michael's telling us, and Quan went to an in-person meet and greet with Mr. Hood and all of that. As near as we can tell, that this is more the latter, not the former. Michael, is it your intent that we probably will have to sign a new engagement letter and probably some new documents that your company changed? Is that a fair assessment? Or
yeah, that's a fair assessment. Again, we will be doing the audit under Hood and Associates, and the report would be issued under Hood and Associates. So the engagement letter will be with Hood and Associates as well as with the library district. So,
Michael, I just thought of something. Is the prior firm, the legal entity, staying intact? And how are you handling the legal issues, the liability issues, I guess, to be, in terms of what prior reports were issued and anything historical?
That's Cochran Head Vick will remain in existence really for, I believe, a year and a half. And then as a part of the acquisition merger agreement, any issues related to liabilities would be assumed by Hood and Associates via the acquisition and merger of Cochran Head Vick and Company. But we will still maintain our legal liability insurance as we always have in case there's issues that may arise.
I got a question. Brent Chandlemeyer, any sense about any impact on our auditing fees?
I'm sorry, Brent, would you repeat that, please?
Any sense how this might impact our auditing fees or upcoming auditing fees?
I really don't see any impact. We still have like I said, regardless of the firm name, we have professional standards that we must follow as independent auditors of the library. And we will conduct our audit as we have in the past in accordance with those standards. So I don't really see any significant change in, again, how we go about approaching the audit of the library. Does that answer your question, Brent?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So, I mean, you answered the standards question. The question is you didn't answer the fee question. So
The what question was that?
the fee, the cost, will the cost to the library can we reasonably expect it will be in the same range as what is?
Yes. I didn't,
Okay.
maybe I misunderstood. I didn't hear. Yeah, the cost is going to be, again, the same as we have in the past with a small increase as we've done annually.
Thank you.
And you can imagine inflation is pretty significant. And so that's been a challenge for CPA firms
Okay,
around the
thank
country
you.
to find personnel.
All right, thank you.
That is true. That is just one thing that's happening is finding and Michael, you can comment on this because you will know, but the move to the 5-year education requirement. I'll leave the historical side part off here, but that has impacted the supply. So all of a sudden, the demand is the same, if not higher, and the supply side is lower. The ability to find candidates, the ability to find people is hard. I've worked with a couple CPA firms, and they're both in the same boat. They're looking for bodies.
I agree.
Any other comments, questions?
If we're concluding this, there was one other topic that I asked Michael to be prepared to speak about. And it was something that Ron had asked John and I to look into. And it's the Missouri statutes, the Rsmo 182-645, and the role of the treasurer. It's certainly, Ron must have had insomnia one night and he was reading section 182. I'm just joking. I mean, it is serious. It is serious that we follow our rules and guidelines. But if you read section 182-645, which was drafted, if I remember correctly, in the mid 1960s, early 1970s, it has a very specific, if you read it and interpret it in a very specific way, there might be questions as to whether or not we are following the letter of the law. And so Michael and I talked about this. Actually, Michael and I talked about this exact topic, what was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago or so, when I was just trying to make sure, same sort of thing. But what we thought we would do is, Michael and I talked about it, and Quan and I talked about it, and I don't remember who the treasurer was at the time, I'm in Joyceland, that we talked about it to make sure that we felt like we were all on the right track. But we felt like it was a good idea to talk about this and what we do and how Michael feels as our auditor that we conform to what the statute says, and then allow you all to ask questions and make sure that you're comfortable with where we are. So Michael, can I turn it over to you and talk a little bit about 182-645?
Yes, you're correct, Steve. We did have a conversation about this a few years back and as recently. And again, I think we're looking at from a perspective of the substance and the intent of those statutes is we felt that the library was following those and that it annually adopts a budget. It has internal controls related to approval of expenditures. There's also on a monthly basis financial information that is presented to the board, and the president and treasurer have open access to any of the books and records. So I think we looked at that and kind of concluded that in the spirit of the statutes, the library was following those. However, like Steve said, if you take the literal interpretation that goes back several years, there may be some question as to if those are being followed. And I was looking at what other organizations do that we audit. As far as the disbursements, they provide a listing to the board sometimes, or the treasurer, listing of disbursements that exceed a specific threshold amount that are deemed significant to that organization. And again, that amount can differ depending on the size of the organization, so that those are able to be reviewed and questions asked if there are any. So I was really looking back at what are the specific concerns of the treasurer regarding the statutes, if I may ask that question.
Michael, hi, this is Ron. Steve is absolutely correct. It was a moment of insomnia when I went through this, but just a bit of background. My thought would be that if a legislative body has, for example, a principle of having safety on the highways, they'll do something like having a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. And if I find myself on a straight highway with no other vehicles, then the question is, clearly in the spirit of the law, I am driving safely. Does that mean I'm constrained by the 55 miles an hour? Literally, yeah, it's 55 is 55, but the spirit, of course, is safety. And at that time, I feel absolutely safe that I'm properly handling my vehicle. And I find compelling reasons on both sides. And that's why I think, frankly, I personally would appreciate some guidance on that. My preference is not to have to go through the effort, but if it's imposed, then we're stuck. So it's the guidance that I think, and certainly it's not anything that has to be determined now or next month, but guidance eventually would be very appreciated.
And if I may, Michael, I want to give you an example of where, because Michael talked a little bit about some of his book of business and some experiences that he's had. I work with a lot of libraries. There's about 150 different library districts in the state of Missouri. We are by far and away the largest of those library districts. Many of those library districts have budgets of less than $1 million. They do not have a professional CPA, MPA, or MBA as their financial officer. They have a 20-hour-a-week bookkeeper. They don't have any sort of internal control system where they've got more than one person to take a look at checks, because they only have a 20-hour-a-week bookkeeper. And if you go back historically, in the 1970s and 1960s, when this was written, that was more the case for library districts than the level that we have here in this organization. So my feeling, and some of the conversation I had with Michael, was that some of this was around creating what you would call internal controls, making sure that there are multiple eyes looking at bills, things like that, in situations where you don't have a lot of infrastructure. So that's why it was written the way it was, so that the treasurer would take a look at all of these things prepared by a bookkeeper who is only here 20 hours a week and make sure that the disbursement is correct. In this case, we are quite different from that in terms of how we are structured, in terms of some of our disbursement and internal controls. And Michael and his team and the people like Kyber and Vic audit and test our internal controls as part of the audit procedures every year. And so, yeah, to the letter of the law, what should be happening is we should be bringing in a stack about this big to every board meeting for the treasurer to look at and physically sign. But the feeling that we've had, and certainly in terms of making sure we get our bills paid on time, that we're doing what it is that we need to be done, and yielding to the auditors, is that using the processes that we have, the budget, which is set before we're allowed to spend money, and then that sets an upper limit. So if we end up needing to spend more money on office supplies, we have to come to the board, ask for that adjustment. But the level of control is As long as we stay within that account line, then we have authorization to spend within that account line. And then Michael is the one who double checks. We double check, he triple checks to make sure that, you know, that we're only spending office supplies out of the office supply line, that we're not buying, you know, cars out of the office supply line or something like that, something inappropriate. And then he goes through his process, and then we bring the audited financials, which of course then the board looks at and considers at the end. So that's our process is different from what's stated in statute. I probably went into a little bit more detail on it, but I want to make sure people understood why the question and why it is different. And if you said, and you just read it, yeah, we don't do that. We don't bring in this stack of checks every month or have you drop everything you need to do to come here to sign 250 to 300 checks, well, probably more than that, close to 500 checks a week, so that we can pay our bills. So yeah, I'm sorry, I'm probably getting a little bit too far into the weeds, but that's what this committee does. This committee is about getting down into that level to fully understand these things.
Yeah, may I ask a question? This is Yummy. May I ask a question?
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, if it does sound like it's sort of an antiquated law that is not applicable, is this something we should just talk with the legislator about? I mean, it seems like this is the kind of thing that I think we do as much as possible need to follow the letter of the law. And if it's not, we're not able to do so, I think that is something we may want to speak with the legislator about.
I could give a little bit of input on that. Yeah, I mean, the issue that we run into with a lot of the changing of the laws is the fact that, as I kind of started off with, that we are so much different than the other library districts. And so as I said, there's about 150 library districts. I would argue maybe 30 of them operate like we do. The remaining 120 really do need this law in place because they still do operate under those constraints. You know, as far as being smaller.
Well,
so
yeah, I just think there's a way that it could be worded that would encompass both our needs and a smaller library system.
yeah, fair enough. We just have to be really careful about doing such things. But yes, I mean, I think that might be something that we could look at doing, particularly if those other larger library districts, you know, probably what we would do is go into 182 and then say, you know, 182, well, take that back. 182, 645 is just consolidated libraries. So we'd go and talk to the other 5 consolidated library districts, see what works for them, and then make such a recommendation. So we could do that. Good.
Any other comments?
Edwin.
Yes.
This is Joycelyn. Just having served in the position of treasurer a few times, I don't see it as, I guess my look at this is not that we're out of compliance. It's just that our level of checks and balances is actually at a higher level than the minimum standard. And so we have multiple eyes looking on it. The treasurer always has access to all those documents and can choose any level of that. We have the auditors that look at it. We have we have qualified staff. We've got regular reporting. We've got the budget structure. We've got a budget and audit committee. I see our checks and balances being as much higher than the minimum of having the treasurer looks at a bunch of checks.
Well, I would absolutely agree that the systems in place absolutely assure beyond reasonable confidence in the books and numbers. But with that is the written statute that says that I am supposed to check every check by name of the payee, amount, and the purpose before I say, John, and I have to certify before I say, John, it's okay as treasurer to push the button to send the checks out. That's what the law says. And frankly, the intention of the law is vastly exceeded by the internal controls that are done here. There's no question about it. Absolutely. You know, Quan and his team do more than what the statute intended, but the damn thing says name, amount, and purpose and all that stuff. And so that's why I asked if Michael and his crew could come with a comfort letter saying, yeah, you are in substantial compliance. And maybe they can do that with their management letter.
Mhm.
But the law imposes upon me the obligation to, quote, certify based upon name, amount, and purpose. And if we're in substantial compliance, that, Michael, you feel we are, I very much look forward to that.
That would be a good example.
Absolutely, because I mean, it's just, as you mentioned, we are adding a level of assurance that is vastly exceeded by the policies and procedures already in place. So to me, it's like, you know, having a second spare tire. You don't need the damn thing.
Darn thing. Any other comments, John?
Yeah, as current treasurer, I would agree that I'm very confident that the procedures that we have now do meet the intent of the law. But I would be equally comfortable with having a letter from our auditor as a part of the management letter, perhaps, or perhaps a separate letter that would affirm that.
Anyone else? Okay, I just another thought, because I spent 8 years in the audit industry, and I still work with CPAs. The audit is directed towards the fairness in the presentation of financial statements. It is not, and Michael, you can correct me, it is not intended to be a full check on every transaction that comes out of here. It is intended to, you know, they test internal controls, they test postings. That's done on a, well, I don't know whether you use true sampling or what we used to call haphazard sampling. But either way, that's how the internal controls are tested, as well as transaction posting. So I just want everybody to understand that the auditors are not a second or third set of eyes on everything that happens. Their focus is on the financial statements. The cost for them to be that third set would probably be triple or quadruple what we spend on audit fees. So that said, I would like this to be taken up by the finance committee as a separate matter and come back to the board, come back to the committee and then subsequently the board with how we wish to proceed. All right. Do I need a vote or can I just, anything?
I think that's good. That's good
Table
direction.
it, we'll table it.
That's good direction for me and
Separately.
Juan.
So appreciate everybody's input on that. So,
Sure.
Okay. Are we done with that item?
I think we are, unless anybody else wants Michael to stick around.
Michael, thank you.
All right, thank you, guys.
Okay, move on to item number 6.1.
Yeah,
John or you?
Yeah, John actually brought these to me.
Okay.
These were on the agenda previously. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, this was intended to give us an opportunity. I think we've been moving for this for a long time now. Very early in the budget process to be having the finance committee to hear from the administration about sort of significant changes that we might anticipate when the budget comes before the committee. That is, initiatives, anything that would be quite a bit different than what we've seen or what we've been doing up to this point, and particularly in the area of new initiatives, that should come up. And it then also gives the members of the committee the opportunity to raise questions too. What are we considering in the following areas and so forth? Or should we be considering things in the budget for the following areas? It wouldn't be making any final decisions. It would just be an initial analysis of the budget in terms of major changes that we might anticipate. And so I didn't intend for this to be a conversation that we would have here, but just a sort of an indication that we would approve that would be a good idea for us as a part of the budget process that the Finance Committee is responsible for, to begin to be able to articulate individually items that we see that ought to be considered, and to hear from the administration concerning items that they are considering that might be a little different than we would have anticipated. So that was the only reason for it to be on there. I don't have any particular items to bring up at this time. I think by the next meeting, perhaps we should, people who have such items to bring up would be prepared to do so.
And practically everyone on this committee is a member of another committee. And so sharing with that committee things that maybe that you might be thinking about. The thing that I will say is that, and I shared this with John, is that, in terms of our budget cycle right now, Quanta's in the process of still finalizing revenues and revenue projections. And that's usually where we start in terms of the cycles, figuring what do we expect, or what do we project our revenues to be. And then we start looking at various initiatives that are going on with staff. So we're still a little bit ahead of that, just a bit. But Quan just sent me an email message this morning where he's received several messages from several of our vendors talking about general inflation. And so that's actually becoming I think that's going to become a new layer that's going to happen before we get to talking about what our hopes and dreams is. What is it going to cost us to toe the line this year over next year? And so once we figure that part out, then we are going to be talking about, obviously be bringing those to various committees. But I think what John was asking in the conversation I had was, as you're doing your other board work and you're hearing what the other committees are doing, start letting this committee know so we can start weaving things in sooner as opposed to later.
Well, that covers my attention. Any other comments?
Well, does that take us into the next 6.2?
I think so.
Any other comments on 6.1 from anybody? Because I asked for this to be put on, and then after the document, Steve, you sent me yesterday, it does have a section on the budget calendar. So, but if I could, you or Quan want to just give everyone an overview of the cycle in case and I'm not going to give you a cheat sheet. I'm going to ask you what the cycle is, and I think we'll make a pair of notes.
No, we'll work on it together. Quan, you want to start off, and if there's anything I need to add in, go ahead.
Okay. Usually we start the budget cycle in March. And also in March, we will receive.
Can you talk a little louder?
Okay, sorry. We start the budget cycle in March. We will need to give a non-binding levy to Jackson County.
And Clay now, because they changed their.
Yes, we usually give to all three counties. By law, in the past, we gave to Jackson County, and now we have to give to Clay County, and we also notify Platte County. And in April, we will present a personnel budget. In May, we will usually finish a preliminary budget. And in June, the board can approve the final budget. If the final budget has not been approved, then the budget we presented in May will become the final budget. In July, we should receive the final assessment for all three counties. And then in September, we will certify the tax levy based on the assessment and based on the inflation and other considerations. Yeah. So that's a that's a summary of the budget calendar.
Okay, that's consistent with your policies. Good. It wasn't a test.
There is a public hearing requirement in there, not that that there's
Right.
been active participation in the public hearing, but it's
It does that.
it does happen, and it's an important thing to include in
That
the
is-
calendar, so.
That is noted in the calendar in here, so it's consistent. The, Quan, you made the statement that if the budget is not approved, and I happen to print out statutes because I was looking at one, because we were talking about the treasurer role, but it says the budget shall be approved on or before June 30th preceding the fiscal year for which the budget was prepared. Okay, so you said that if we don't approve the budget, then the May budget becomes the operating budget.
I believe that's in the board policy.
That's a board
Well,
policy.
I'm reading the statute.
Right.
Okay, sorry, I was.
So I think that may be the board policy, but what happens what happens if we don't come to terms on a budget? Yes, I mean, the board policy says one thing, that the statute says I have to.
Yes.
It doesn't say what I do if we don't.
Again, this is based on the board policy. We presented a budget in May to the board. And we hope the budget will be approved as a final budget right in June. And if not, then the budget we presented will be the final budget.
Yeah.
I guess I may kick this back and we'll ask the attorney. Is that the appropriate?
Yeah, you can. I mean,
It seems we have a conflict with the statute. And again, and maybe there's somewhere else in the statute. I didn't peruse the statutes in regard to that matter. But I'd like to make sure we're operating in sync.
Yeah, so just, quick comment and then a follow-up question. So in practice, we haven't had a situation where we
Right.
haven't gone through a process and not adopted the budget by June 30th. And so what happened at some point, I do not remember when this happened. It happened after I was finance manager, but before I was director. So it's sort of that Dick Wilding era, I think, is when we created this policy. And I think it was under advice of our auditors at the time, which is sort of, if for some reason you do not comply with this, what is your belt and suspenders approach? And they recommended that we create a board policy, which we did, and we've never used it. I know that other libraries do things like a continuing resolution, like the federal government does, a CR, which that's something I wouldn't want to do. I would much rather that we do.
No,
what the
I agree.
statute says. So I guess I'm
not
trying to ask.
suggesting we'll get to that or suggest. I just happen to read statute. So let's defer that and we can take that up and get it addressed.
Okay.
All right. I prefer to get a nail in the coffin on it.
Brent, my hope is that we would approve a budget. Otherwise, we would be the U.S. Congress. And
We totally agree.
And so, what that means is that we have to have, other meetings or additional meetings. And so in the library is 65, 67?
Oh, I can't speak
Well,
as far
anyway,
back.
it is an instance that has not occurred. And in some senses is that, frankly, in my time on the board is that the development of the budget has become a vastly improved process that allowed people to provide input along the way. Preliminary versions, I remember in early years of the board, you got it on Saturday and you voted on Monday, and you really didn't even have a chance to interact with the development and formulation of it. And so we have gotten better at this. I'm mindful of what the law requires, but I don't see us having any difficulty meeting the requirements of the law.
Agreed. So, okay. Any other comments?
No, any other clarification for you on the cycle or the calendar? Okay.
No, all right, thank you. Okay, are there any public comments?
Teresa, did you have any public comments?
No, I do not.
Okay, so.
The next item is other business.
Right, and so John, you were wanting me to talk a little bit about what we talked about in the building committee meeting in here.
Yeah, I thought Brent maybe.
Okay, yeah. Why would you do that?
I'll do this. Some of us were there, Ron and Gordon. The building committee met at 9 o'clock. You may not have this. This is a capital dashboard, or, it's going, this covers the building program that we had. There was a motion that was approved unanimously by the building committee. We're at the bottom of our project list. The two really outstanding items are Green Valley and East Lee Summit.
Independence.
Excuse me.
East Lee Summit's just fine.
Yes, I always lapse into that. So they're identified on the dashboard as work package, WP is work package 9 and 13. And the action by the board, by the committee unanimously was to reduce the square footage of these projects by 10,000 square feet, partly combined, 2,500 for Green Valley, 10,000 for East Lee Summit, partly because we've understand how to use better use of space, and that maybe East Independence was oversized. There was projected population growth that hasn't occurred there, but that it would be constructed in such a fashion if at a later point that you could add an addition. So the practical effect of these, and this was something that really drove the decision and drove the discussion, is in light of increasing inflation in the building market in particular, and given the budget that we made available, that this should bring us in so that we won't exceed the budget amount that's shown on this. So we wanted the finance committee to be aware of this because, to John's earlier point, if we came in and said, hey, you won't believe what we just decided to do. We just decided to kind of go hog wild and go do something like that. We have really tried to manage to a bottom line, and we've done a very solid job really around that. We benefited from a guaranteed maximum price, which exposed our financial risk. When we get a maximum price, that's it. If it comes in lower than that, we realize the savings, from that. So this has been an ambitious program. I think that you were around in an earlier part of it all, and we were well advised to start early because we realized the benefit of the lower cost. So the thing that the finance committee needs to know is that efforts, a motion will come to the full board when we meet to recommend these changes, and it reduces the square footage of these two projects, which has the practical effect of making sure that we don't exceed the budget amount on the dashboard. Yeah, that's
the bottom line. The concern was, are we staying within that budget?
Yeah.
There are always changes, and and the changes have accelerated on these last two projects, and so we're confident. There was a unanimous vote of the buildings committee that we were within budget and we would meet the requirements of the budget if we took these actions. And so that's what we'll go for.
And just as a sidebar, and if you want additional information, I'm happy to talk with you about it. Riverside, there is a commitment for a certain amount of money that is still within that. We've had board approval to enter into discussions with the city of Riverside about an expanded project for which that they would provide additional contributions toward that. And we may end up having to make some additional contributions toward that, but it's been a widely and significantly long time discussed, conversation. So the Riverside money is still in there. We decided the additional part of this would be building a new branch at a new location rather than renovating at its current location. And the renovation money is within this budget. And to the degree that we go to a new site, that renovation money would move over there with it. City is interested. This is what motivated this, is the city was interested in that corner and that they would pay us cash for that corner or money for that corner. And that has had Ron is shaking his head in agreement. There's several things we have said no to, and we have, pursued it at some great length, and we're nearing to a final decision and documents about that. So I just share that with you because it is other than where we started, but it's the current board view of it is it's a favorable project that has a significant contribution by that community, which exceeds any contribution by any other community to build a library branch. And we've engaged in good faith negotiations really around it and try to kind of protect our financial interest in the discussions and try to leverage their interest in having their corner to the advantage of the library system.
Any questions or comments?
And
Jocelyn?
I just wanted to add on to what Brent said. Brent, you did a really good job of summarizing the financial impact of this. But I also wanted to note in here, that was also noted in the building committee meeting, is that big kudos to staff and to our construction management and building team for providing the flexibility to reduce the size but maintain the promises that we gave to the communities, that this will not reduce services. We've been much more efficient as we went along in how buildings are constructed, and it won't take away from any current services, and it will be built to increase services and with the potential of increasing more depending on numbers. So the committee was very satisfied that we were keeping to the promises that we made.
Yeah, that covers it, I think. Thank you. I appreciate your summary.
I need to get my geography right, but you know.
Any other questions or comments?
Gordon, just to reiterate why we're even talking about this in finance, we spent the last couple of meetings, we really did a deep dive on the capital plan. But this committee did a deep dive on the capital plan to make sure that we were still spending correctly.
As it should.
Yes, and so with this new change, and as we're coming up on the finish line, it seemed to pull through.
Okay. Maybe I'll talk to Brent and he can bring me up to speed, or you, whichever is appropriate.
Whichever way you want to do it.
So, okay. Anything else?
And Michael Lazio is co-chair of the building committee. And so Michael is also somebody else that you're going to, talk with about it. We've continued the, particularly on the building committee, we thought it was good to have co-chairs and to do that. So.
Yeah, I just like to get the numbers in my head. So, anyway, anything else? Any other business?
I don't think any other, at least not from staff.
Okay. That leaves the last item on the agenda for the closed session. And I guess I need a vote for that.
We do.
What's the official process?
Yeah, we need to officially state why we're going into closed session. We're going into closed session on advice of our counsel to discuss legal actions, causes of action or litigation involving a public governmental body, as stated up there. And then Teresa will do a roll call for us. And Cody, in terms of staff, think about this for a second. Now, in terms of staff, I think leave Susan Ray remotely, bring Susan Ray back into the closed session, but I'd like to keep the rest of it just within this room.
This is Brent Schottenmeyer. I make a motion that we go into closed session for the reasons stated on the screen, which is legal actions of causes of action or litigation.
For a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Oh, Teresa will do a roll call.
Okay.
For this.
All right. Yes, I'm sorry.
Gordon,
Yes.
Joycelyn,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Yummy,
Yes.
Brent,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Ron.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Right, so